Welcome, dear friends and supporters of the Afar Nation. My name is Ariel Magnet, and I'm thrilled to be your MC again this year. And I want to thank you so much for attending this year's EANC conference. This gathering brings together distinguished guests from various Eritrean opposition groups and experts who will consider pathways forward for the democratic transition of Eritrea. Our agenda today includes presentations by activists as well as experts. We also have some fun for you, including delicious Afar cuisine and a cultural presentation hosted by the local Afar community. Among key points for our discussion this evening are establishing an autonomous Dinkalia within a united, decentralized Eritrea, facilitating dialogue with international and regional stakeholders to promote this cause, the role of the diaspora in promoting Afar autonomy, and the shape of Eritrea's future democracy. Just before calling on speakers, I want to acknowledge and thank Afar friends who are joining us through Zoom today. Our next presenter will be Warren L. Crete. As head of Immigration Law Group at Perley-Robertson, Hill and McDougall, Warren represents individuals, families, and corporations in all aspects of immigration and emigration. In 2008, Crete helped found the Can-Go Afar Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to helping the Afar, one of the planet's oldest aboriginal cultures. He continues to act as president of the foundation and legal counsel to the Afar people. Thank you so much, Warren.
Ariel, thank you for doing such a great job again this year and joining us as our MC. Thank you, Joe Madaaba, for that presentation. Every time you give this presentation, and its improvement and development, the historical background and research that you've taken a deep dive in. I learned so much, and I'm so grateful for your involvement, and impressed by your encouraging words for those of us gathered here in this room and on Zoom. We've really got to listen to what you just heard. We've got to follow your recommendations. It's evidence-based. It's based on academics, not just you, but many others. It's based on political history, and we gotta do what Professor Magnet has inspired us to do. Salam alaikum, everyone. I too am greatly honored to have been asked to participate and share comments and discussion with you at this conference. We do this every year. Sometimes we've traveled to Brussels, to Uppsala, to Stockholm, and other places. We presented last year at your Pennsylvania conference by Zoom. Unfortunately, we couldn't drive down there, but as Professor Magnet said, you can count on us and our continuing ongoing involvement in support of the grievances and the solutions. Above all, I too am a lawyer, and I too trace my involvement to joining with you in common cause, to the refugee cases, the asylum cases I represented starting 30 years ago. I had not heard of the Afar until that very person came into my office. I probably followed that case with 30 others before Ahmed Yusuf and others came to my office, having themselves tried to engage with the government of Canada by sending letters and making calls that were not returned. Ahmed and his other elders came into my office, firstly to thank me for what I had done for those 30 cases. And then there was another visit, and each time they would bring a gift of thanks and kind words of gratitude. And then there was a conference 17 years ago. There was a conference at Carleton University, not unlike this one. It was small, it was humble, and it wasn't as sophisticated because we didn't have Professor Magnet on our team at that point. But we were learning, and Ahmed and others brought Valerie Browning, Malika, from Ethiopia, from the Afar region, from Abta, which I'm sure most of you in this room and on Zoom have heard about. And I, when called to duty, invited some others, Flora MacDonald, our former Minister of Immigration and Foreign Affairs, and David McGuinty. These were or are members of Parliament to come and learn and share ideas and speak about the grievances. And from that humble beginning at Carleton University 17 years ago, Ahmed passed the hat and bought me a ticket, and I was on an airplane within months going to the Afar region, and we were welcomed by State President Ismail, and the United Nations, by the way. I mean, when we got there, no one had done what we were about to do, and they knew that. The United Nations knew that Canadians had not arrived to show any interest, not just in the Afar challenges in the Afar state, but the refugees pouring out of Eritrea, numbering now 100,000. No one had gone there. ARA was registering them and then referring them to the UNHCR. But there was very little resettlement. And the World Food Program was compromised by these 100,000 people. They didn't have the funds. They didn't have the infrastructure. They didn't have the ability to feed, house, medicate, educate, and all the many other programs that the UN is required to do when a refugee comes under their mandate because of a border that's been crossed. So Ahmed took me. The United Nations gave us cars and drivers. And we went deep into the Afar region, right up at the border with Eritrea. And I could not believe my eyes. I'd heard the stories, but I couldn't believe what I was then to see. Thousands of Eritreans of all ages who had walked through the desert, 100 kilometers in the heat. It was 54 degrees Celsius. And I was there with Ahmed, and I could not believe my eyes. And every time I've been back, I've funded 17 trips, personally funded 17 trips, of which I've been on 11 of them. Gone to those same areas, seen those same refugees. It's better now because ARA and the United Nations have built refugee camps. They've set up programs. It's better now, but it's still horrible. And these people have very little hope. And they're not being serviced by people like us in this room and on the Zoom who care about them and want to do more for them. And that comes back to what Professor Joe had said about advocacy. So Ahmed and I started this humanitarian organization called the Can-Go Afar Foundation. And we incorporated a not-for-profit. And then we applied for charitable status here in Canada. The Canadian government granted it and said, you go. And if you remember President Obama's pledge during his campaign, yes, we can. Do you remember? Yes, we can. You remember the chants? Yes, we can. We did it. And we called our foundation Can-Go Afar. Can, short for Canada, but can. Yes, we can. And we punched above our weight from the very first day. We've raised funds, about 500,000 Canadian dollars have been raised in this country and deployed with almost no expenses incurred here in Canada. It's all gone into the Afar region. It's helped refugees from Eritrea in Yemen, in Djibouti, in Ethiopia, even here in Canada, because the community of Afar people is growing and they need help. They need to be properly settled, and they need to be enabled, and they need to have hope. So we funded programs here, there, and everywhere we possibly can. I'm very proud of that. So the first trip that Ahmed and I did was in 2007. It's a long time ago. And we're still here. And as I said, every time I went back, I looked at the bigger problem. It wasn't about just food, nutrition, and clothing for the refugees. That certainly is needed. And we could do that for the rest of our lives and have great outcomes. But I said there's a bigger issue here. And I saw the 100,000 coming from Eritrea. And so I started wondering, what can we do that's better than buying nutrition and clothes and medical supplies for the refugees? What can we do to stop the 100,000 and the more than 100,000 that want to come? And many have died en route and been killed en route. They've been shot as they reach the border. You know the stories better than I do. And we presented this evidence in hearings here in Canada, in our court systems. And of course, there's a 100% success rate for any Afar refugee from Eritrea. It's 100%. As Professor Joe said, it is the harshest violator of human rights in the world today, and has been for decades. So it's not difficult winning a refugee claim for an Afar Eritrean. It's quite easy if you have the right evidence. So at the end of that first trip, I can remember when we were returning the car and the driver to State President Ishmael. And through interpretation, he looked at me and he said to me this, and I quote him, "Do not feel any obligation. Just by coming here and seeing us, how we live, you have done much more than most others. So humble are you and your people." And, as I've said to Ahmed and at these conferences before, that's part of the problem. You are too humble. And you're too timid to stand up. And you're doing a much better job because of the conferences like this that are being organized. So I'm here to say, stand up for your rights. Don't be shy. Because as Professor Magnet quite properly showed you, it's only those that claim their rights that actually achieve protection and hope for the next generation. So, when I came back to Canada, I said to Ahmed, we've got a long list of things that we could work on. We can't do them all. Let's work on a few and see how far we get. And we've gotten far. And I've shared with you what some of those things are. Okay, so I don't know what slide we're at here. Oh, could you go back a little bit? Go to the map. Look at this. That's the reason why people are leaving Eritrea. 59% conflict. Say conflict. 8% social, not the map. Let's go back to this list, please. No, here, right here. Social tension. Look at that. Those are big numbers. And Professor Joe showed you. As soon as you cross a border, you come under the mandate, hopefully, of the UNHCR. But that's not the solution. And I was sitting beside a young gentleman over there from Pennsylvania. He left Eritrea. Why? Because there's forcible conscription. Now, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing unlawful about that. But the problem with Eritrea is unlimited duration. It's not 2 years as it is in other countries. That's fine. Countries that have mandatory conscription, service to country for 2 years, that's lawful. But in Eritrea, it's unlimited. There's no end to it. It goes on for decades. Parents never see their kids again. And he ran away from Eritrea like many of you in this room. And, as Professor Joe showed you, many end up in boats in North Africa, leaving Tunisia, leaving Libya, leaving Algeria, leaving Egypt, and trying to cross the Mediterranean into Europe. And what happens to those boats? Many of them capsize. And there's big pressure to stop that movement in Italy particularly, but elsewhere, to intercept those boats. I had a meeting 2 days ago with the United Nations, the IOM, the agency of the UN that knows what's going on in terms of migration and sees that there's going to be no change. So they want to see planned movement of people, because people will move. People are moving at great risk across the Mediterranean and elsewhere as stowaways and so forth. Great risk to themselves, dying often en route. So the IOM knows that something has to be done, and a community of countries have to gather together to do something about this, to stop the risk and the danger to people from doing this. And you and us have to do something about Eritrea to stop it. Because as Joe said, people are proud of where they've come from. No matter how horrible it's been, they're proud of where they came from. They have a sense of community, national pride, no matter how harsh it's been. They want to go back. So we got to create circumstances that make it safe for them to do that. And that means gathering. So let's go to my next slide. Here's the list of grievances. We've heard Ahmed talk about them. We've heard Professor Joe talk about them. There's many more than I could put on one slide, but the UN has validated every single one of those. Why and how? Based on evidence. Evidence that Professor Joe and Ahmed and myself and many others beyond this room have got good legal briefs, good evidence, and shared it with the United Nations. The United Nations investigated it. Didn't just trust what we said. They went and verified it themselves, and then file these human rights reports every year, validating what we say. So let's talk about the solutions. That's just some of them. We've done every single one of them, of those solutions. We're doing them. We've raised money. People like you have given time and energy and your own money to donate to causes like this one, including to charitable organizations. We've collected evidence. We've filed complaints with the United Nations, who have investigated, and with other, with governments. We've done advocacy and awareness. Count yourselves amongst them. You're doing it right now. Don't be shy. Stand up for your rights. We've organized conferences. We've spoken at conferences. It's not easy to do these conferences. Some of you have come from far at your own personal expense. You know, a whole day trip or more to get here. Just to go to this conference and then a whole day trip or more to go home. So we gather, we discuss, we share ideas, and we try to reach out to other nationalities and ethnicities to show them some of our ideas. We sign petitions. Here, there's a declaration. Ahmed and Professor Joe have been too gentle. They've asked you to consider the declaration. I'm telling you, read it and sign it. We have considered this for more than 10 years. The words of that declaration have been in the Samara Declaration, in the Addis Declaration, in the Pennsylvania Declaration, in the Uppsala Declaration. All those words are there. It's time to act. It's time to sign it and share it online so that more people sign it and momentum is gathered. Now, we've done all those things, but there's more to come. We got to consider filing complaints with the International Court of Criminal Justice. We got to think about starting lawsuits. One courageous plaintiff brought an action for his enslavement here in Canada. Supreme Court validated it could proceed against the Bisha mine. And the Canadian mining company was terrified of what was coming when the Supreme Court said it could advance. Settled the claim, as Joe has told us. Didn't want to be in the news anymore. We got to do that. We got to do that in our countries, and we got to do that in The Hague. I want to thank you again for asking me to be part of this journey. Gadige. Everyone have a great time tonight.